everybody got their spring cleaning done early.
You ready to start, Kurt? Yes, sir. Okay, can everybody hear me? All right. So we'll start the pre-meeting agenda with the WHAM voting delegation. Mr. City Attorney.
Did you say attorney or manager?
Or, I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager.
We'll go either way. Either way.
Whoever wants to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being with us here tonight. It is that time of the year where we need to appoint a voting delegate to carry council's representation down in the summer convention this year. Assuming we have a summer convention in, I believe it's Laramie. If I could turn the time over to the city clerk to kind of walk us through those deliberations and get your direction, I would certainly appreciate that.
Thanks, Council. Your Honor, basically, we talked about this a little bit before. WHAM asked us to select a voting delegate and a backup, and we talked about it a little bit, and we were going to reach back out to you as we need to pass the resolution. The meetings, they wanted the information so that we could have it to them by May, which means we'd need to pass it at our next April 21st council meeting. However, I'm not sure if their meetings are going to take place, but we just thought we'd stay on just in case. We don't know what they're going to end up doing, so we thought we would try and stick to our schedule. So if you can tell us who you would like to select as your voting delegate and as your alternate, we can go ahead and draft up the minute action for our next council meeting in a few weeks.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cathy.
Yesterday morning, I got an email from Justin Schilling, and title of that is Cancellation of WHAM 2020 Summer Convention. And it says WHAM 2020 Summer Convention canceled to remain in Laramie for summer 2021. So isn't this kind of a moot point?
I hadn't seen that. Is that right? Okay.
I guess it is a moot point then, isn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would agree. I hadn't seen that email. I wasn't aware of that step being taken. And so if that is indeed the case, I think that's correct. We probably won't need that meeting or that delegation.
Delegation?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Cathy. All right, we'll move on to community relations spec update. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. A number of weeks ago, pursuant to some difficulties with one of our larger projects during the last construction season, and as a result of the conversation that we all had together, Andrew has been working on putting together what we call a community relations piece being added to the standard language of the contracts that we are putting forward to contractors as it relates to projects that contractors work on our behalf with. That community relations spec has been one that we have gathered feedback from the contracting community as well as other stakeholders to put this together. And so if it pleases the council, I'd like Andrew to approach the podium and discuss that a little bit and walk us through it and have it ready for this construction season if it pleases the council.
Thank you.
Mayor, council, Carter phrased that very well. We did have some interactions last construction season which were less than favorable between contractors and our residents. It is not uncommon for us to have interaction between contractors and residents, and in fact, for the most part, we encourage it so that the public knows what the contractor is doing and when to expect things to happen. The community relations spec that you should have in your packet is just a lot of really common sense and common courtesy that we don't always see exercised out in the field by our contractors. It is very simplistic in the fact that we require contractors to have clothing that people can recognize them as working on a city project. It could be in the form of a safety vest and hard hat or an ID badge, but something very simplistic like that. They have to have a communication plan. They have to know what to tell the public when the public comes up and asks them, what are you doing? What are you working on? It's not, you would think that the contractors working in the field know what they're doing, but not everybody working on a project actually knows what we're trying to accomplish. It requires a supervisor be on the job site at all times. Oftentimes, we will show up in a job, and there's nothing but workers out there, and there's no supervisor out there overseeing the project happening on the job. So those are some very basic rudimentary things that we expect a contractor to adhere to. On some of the larger projects, they will be required to have a neighborhood meeting to invite the neighborhood to a project location, hopefully near the project site, so that we can actually explain what we're doing, the impacts, how they can still manage to ingress and egress to their property during construction. We require project signs identifying the project, who they can contact if they do have issues, and also flyers that can be handed out. If you have any concerns or issues, here's the contact information for you to call and ask questions of. You won't see it in all of our projects, but certainly the larger projects, you will see this type of spec being implemented. We've got a Ridgecrest Zone 2, Zone 3 water main project that's going out to bid here pretty quick, hopefully. We've got Midwest Phase 2 between David and between Elm and Walnut, or Spruce, I mean. That will be part of that spec. So some of our larger specs, you will see this begin to be implemented. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Andrews, this looks like this will pretty much take care of some of the issues we were dealing with last year with some of the bigger projects. I mean, it kind of a contact, if you will, that when issues came up like we saw in the last construction season, at least the people would have a point of contact to go to with their complaints.
Mayor, Council, this will certainly help. We will always have interactions that we view as not appropriate out in the field, but this gives us a mechanism to remove an employee that is not adhering to this spec, and it provides the public at least with a person that they know they can call.
Okay. Councilman Hopkins, did you have a question? Bob, your mic's not on.
Councilman Hopkins?
There you go.
Lip reading.
There you go. Still can't hear. Councilman Hopkins, we still can't hear you. Yeah.
Madam Clerk, is there a phone number that he can call to dial in?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that number is 1-312-757-3121.
Did you copy that, Councilman?
And your access code is 228-189-957. And did you get that?
He's waving us off, I think.
Somebody can call him at home.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe if we can contact Councilman Hopkins at home, we'll give him a number to call in, and, I'd have you write down your question, Councilman Hopkins, but I don't know how long it is.
Can you hear us?
I don't know.
We're gonna reach out to him.
We'll call Councilman Hopkins.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay, now she's talking to him.
Now we're cooking.
So while we're waiting, any other council members have questions of Andrew?
Ice in the sandbox.
Well, sounds like a good plan.
Okay. Move.
My only comment is it once again proves the truism that there is a story behind every rule.
Okay. Thank you, and if Councilman Hopkins has a question, I might ask you to answer it for us, but we can probably move on then.
Not a problem.
Okay. Okay, with no other questions under that, Mr. City Manager, we'll move on to the audit review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Not too long ago, the Finance Committee had the opportunity to visit with the auditors as it relates to fiscal year 19's year in audit. The auditors came back with an unqualified opinion, as we wrote in your memo. We did have difficulty as it relates to some of the entries for the year-end calculations and so forth. Consequently, there was more rework than was normally appropriate and acceptable, and accordingly, there were more hours engaged in that audit, and will result in a higher bill than normal. The numbers in the audit are accurate. The reflection of the city's adherence to its financial policies and so forth are appropriate. While we did have some rework that was necessary from the auditors, the use of and stewardship of the city's tax dollars that have been allocated by the taxpayers is appropriate. I have asked Mr. Pitlick to answer any questions that you might have or any other directions that you'd like to offer, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, Mr. City Manager, Mayor. As Carter mentioned, this was a challenging audit for us. The Finance Division is going through a transitional period, not only in the form of personnel changes, but also with the computer conversion. And this certainly contributed to the difficulties we had. The audit itself, is, the City Manager mentioned, is an unqualified opinion, which basically is the opinion you want, that it indicates that the financial statements are presented in a fair manner and also in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles. Financially, it was a solid year for the city. Our general activities, our general funds, basically had an increase of over $7 million of growth from the prior year. This not only includes the general fund itself, but also funds that are combined into that for reporting purposes. The large contributing factor to that is the sales tax we did from the prior year. We did have about $3.6 million more in sales tax revenue in total in 2019 than we had in 2018. We also realized more investment income, although the investments still are not where we'd like them to be. There was some positive movement with that. There were 3 findings in the audit. Last year there were 4, so we did get rid of 1 finding, which dealt with some grants, so that was an important one to get off the record for us. We will continue to learn from our experiences and certainly have the goal of correcting those deficiencies. I know the staff is coming together as a team and taking the opportunities to get further education. I think we're expanding the knowledge base across the team, so there will be a number of people who are familiar and aware with what the process needs to be. So with that, if there's any questions, I will certainly try to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll, move on to the Goodstein parking area lease. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think we now have Mr. Hopkins on if he would like a question entertained.
Oh, yeah. Councilman Hopkins, did you have a, question from when we were discussing the, community relations spec update?
Well, I'm not sure you can hear me now, but I
We
hear
got you.
you, but never mind the question. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Yeah, never mind the question. I was just, commenting that I think it was a pretty good job on the WAM voting delegate and the community relations spec update.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we are at long last to the point of having completed a longer-term lease with the state as it relates to the use of the Goodstein parking lot area. As council will recall, that is both the north and south lots that are adjacent to Collins Avenue and Ash as cross streets there, and extends up to Midwest, and I believe that's David on the east side. The basic terms are as follows. It is an 18-year full lease that allows the council to use the area in question at your discretion. It does allow for the redevelopment of the area for parking purposes. It does require that 25% of the of the entire area, which would be basically, roughly 50% of the south lot, be made available for recreational purposes should that need ever arise. The other terms that you're going to want to be aware of are that indeed the state does have the ability to initiate a recall, not in a period prior to the first 3 years of the relationship with the city. But that period of notice would be, is it 3 or 4 years, Mr. Attorney? 3 years. The period of notice would be a 3-year period of notice. And so upon notice, we would basically have 36 months to work out our situation with respect to that property. Beyond that, Mr. Mayor, if the attorney would like to add any of the thoughts to the conversation before any questions, we'd be happy to move in that direction in this matter.
Mr. Mayor, Council, we were pretty happy with the first provisions that the state was very cooperative and generous, I thought, in letting us set the tone for the property and all of the various uses that could be done with it. So if you look at that, we can do governmental business, of course, public parking, of course, but then they put in recreation, which is a very broad term. Downtown civic activities, activities that do not involve the building of permanent structures for human occupation. So all of those are very broad terms. So if you wanted to have a downtown gathering of Shriners or of the Kiwanis or of the Rotary people, you could do that. If you wanted to have a gathering place for the Good Time Sam's people that are coming through with their travel trailers, you could do that. So there's a variety of things you can do. Possibility, have food truck Fridays or food truck something another day or a couple of days a week. So we felt very good about that. The people at the state were really very good to work with. It was a difficult negotiation. There are a lot of cogs to turn, but we were very happy with the state, and the term of the lease, though, I think is controlled by some of the higher people. So the fact that we may be putting in a substantial amount of money only to have it recalled after 6 years would be, I think, kind of devastating to learn. But that's a possibility, but I suspect not a probability.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from council?
I just wanted to pass on that I am now on telephone. I lost my internet connection, but I'm still here.
Okay, sounds good. Councilman Powell, did you have something?
Well, I'm just curious, Mr. Henley, did the state have any reason why they wanted to have this recall clause? Is there It is a little bit concerning that we might spend a fair amount of money to create a parking lot and then have the option of giving us 3 years' notice. Can you tell us if there was some reasoning there?
You know, we had a lot of discussions about that. We tried, I don't know how many different tactical maneuvers to get around that. Their position is, though, basically that they don't want to be binding the state government for an extraordinarily long period of time. They don't know what will happen as far as their state building commission and whether they will need that property or want to do something with that property at some point. Originally, it was thought maybe 3 years because they felt it would be at least that long before they could gather their plans and present it to the legislature and get appropriation to do something different. But they knew that because they're working on the state office building right now, that's going to take a bit of time and a substantial amount of money. So they were able to give us a 3-year waiver without any type of concern that we would be called, and then another 3 years on top of that. So we did discuss it. I think it's just a matter of it's the fact that it's their property. We were getting a good price on it. And if they did have something that came along that they wanted to use it for, they wanted to be able to do that in a reasonable amount of time from their perspective. Of course, from our perspective, it would be a huge amount of money and assets spent for a short-term benefit to the city.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Councilman Hopkins.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I think it's a good lease. I understand where the state's coming from. My only question is, heard any movement on the possibility of an R321 parking lot in addition to that, or was that involved in the discussion?
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Hopkins, it does appear that a parking lot for the ART 321 area there is going to happen, but it'll happen under the auspices of the construct of the state facility and not necessarily the construction of the Ash Street parking lot or the Goodstein parking lots. So it'll happen, but not something we have to do.
Okay, cool.
Okay. On to agenda review, draft of text amendment, chapter 840, litter control schedule. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This really is a question for the council to potentially give direction on. A number of weeks ago, in fact, it was during the first reading of the Kensington development, one of the neighbors to the development asked if there were a way that we could mandate the closure of the roll-off bins that handle construction material and so forth during the time that the construction of that development takes place. We had looked into ordinance opportunities that would allow us that type of authority to demand or whatever. The reality is we don't have that ordinance in place. And so the question to the council is whether or not council would like staff to put something together for you to consider in draft form, bring it up in a work session that you would assign and see if that's something you'd like to move forward with.
Thank you. Any comments on that? Are we good and staff putting something together and bringing it forward to us?
Mr. Mayor, this is Huber. I'd be interested in taking a look at something like that. I had kind of thought that there was something like that in place. You know, we see these erosion control fences and things like that around construction sites now. You know, I don't want to be anything to be overly burdensome on contractors or anything, but I'd like to take a look at something like that.
Okay. Looks like a majority of thumbs were up on that, so we'll move forward on that. Okay. Thank you. Did we have, before I ask about agenda review and get started, or do we have something to cover with resolutions?
Mr. Mayor, there's a couple things I'd like to bring up under this part of the agenda, if it's okay. One of which is referring back again to the Kensington development. Indeed, the first two readings took place successfully without a subdivision agreement being completed. We did forward a subdivision agreement to the council over the weekend, and we do have an agreement with the developer as it relates to an outstanding balance that is due to the city. Council will recall that indeed the development of the area in question was contingent upon a sum of money being paid to the city as a result of an agreement with the previous development and the construction of Country Club Road. That amount is in the amount of $263,000, the first half of which would be paid upon the dispensing of the first building permit, the second half of which would be paid on the dispensing of the second building permit, at whatever point in time that might be. The subdivision agreement also allows that a lien be placed for both of those payments with regard to the development of that property, and which of course allows the city to be part of any of the title action that would take place upon the sale of those properties or the passing of that development on to another developer. Those were the primary elements of the agreement with regard to the developer that constitutes the subdivision agreement that is in place and would be passed by the council this evening if they do adopt this development on third reading tonight.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Looks like we're good. And then we had one other to cover. Is that correct?
I think you may have misspoke. You said the first permit and then the second permit. So first phase, first permit, first phase, first permit, second phase.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Do you want to?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, Council, I think when Carter was speaking, he just had a quick little thought. We're going to get the first payment on the first phase, first permit, and then that will be billed out. And then when they go to the second phase, again, we will obtain then the second payment when that first permit's drawn for that. So it's not like the first two permits are going to generate the entire sum of money paid to the city.
Okay. Okay.
The next item, Mr. Mayor, that I wanted to bring to council's attention, tonight you're being asked to consider a delegation of authority for the EOC to be organized under what I typically refer to as a unified command structure. That is the larger question that we're asking tonight for council's consideration, a part of which would also include the delegation of additional funding for the EOC to continue their efforts in keeping supplied and dealing with costs and expenses that come with that unit being deployed. The second piece, however, that is a newer piece, is with respect to getting funding put together for the appointment of medical staff to be put in place with regard to the quarantine centers that are being organized and put into effect right now. One of which is the Westwood School, the second of which would be the event center, and in the event that we need to, that staffing would take place at the rec center as well, should we get to that point, and that's certainly unclear at this point in time. The other thing, though, that we need to have council do, which is actually over and above the resolution that we have in front of you already, is a second, more detailed resolution that would be consistent with what it is the county has put into play already, and the body of which you should have in your email this evening. Again, that it asks the same thing. It includes a lot more detail, however, and it's different enough in that type of information that my request would be, if it's okay with the council, to get that on for the agenda tonight to pass as well. and over and above what it is that we've asked for your consideration already.
And this would include the funding we were talking about.
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions or comments on this?
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could, what we will need then for formal consideration this evening is the request from one of your body to amend the agenda for that resolution to be considered appropriately. That second resolution, if you will.
Okay. And it looks like I'm getting a thumbs up, so,
All right.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Before we start the meeting, is there anything else on the agenda that anybody has any questions or concerns about?
Mr. Mayor, my only question is, do we need that motion to amend the agenda right at the beginning of the meeting, or, when will you call for that?
Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, we do have the language put together in your agenda, and that portion would be relegated accordingly. So what I would suggest is just go ahead and go through the agenda, and you'll be prompted, Mr. Mayor, to call for that potential motion.
Okay. Okay, before we begin this evening, I'd like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones, or those of you that are actually physically here. And I now call the April 7th, 2020 regular council meeting to order. Please call the roll, and when your name is called, please state here.
Mayor Friel.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Here.
Councilman Kathy.
Here.
Councilman Paul.
Here.
Councilman Bates.
Here.
Thank you. Councilman Pacheco.
Here.
Councilman Huber.
Here.
Councilman Johnson.
Here.
Councilman Hopkins.
Here.
All members are present.
Chair would entertain a motion to by minute, no. All right, let's move on from there now that everybody's here. Council meetings are televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Council meetings are also streamed live on YouTube, and links to previous meetings are available on our webpage. Public comments will be taken by telephone during the appropriate parts of the meeting. Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the March 17th, 2020 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on March 27th, 2020.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Powell, second by Councilman Hopkins. Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
I think he said.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the March 17th, 2020 executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, second by Councilman Powell. Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell,
Aye.
Councilman Bates,
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco,
Aye.
Councilman Huber,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
And on the next ones, when we do this, maybe if you guys give me a thumbs up, because I'm not sure I'm getting the right people when they say aye on this, so. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the April 7th, 2020 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel,
Aye?
Vice Mayor Lutz,
Aye.
Councilman Kathy,
Aye.
Councilman Powell,
Aye.
Councilman Bates,
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco,
Aye.
Councilman Huber,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Now's the time we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address. Direct all questions, comments to the mayor and the mayor only. No personal attacks on staff or council will be tolerated. Council will not respond to personnel matters. These will be referred to the city manager. Questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by council members. Presentations are limited to 5 minutes and duplication of speakers will not be allowed, nor will the time extensions be permitted. The public comment phone number is area code 307-235-8215. And we will begin by calling citizens that have already requested to speak. So the first one we have, we're good to go. The first one we have is Jim Gleason. What's that? Oh, Mr. Gleason, are you on the line?
Mayor Friel, I have Mr. Paul Hack on the line, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Hack, go ahead.
Okay. So basically, we're coming to you tonight. We wanted to ask for permission. What we're looking to do is spread just a little bit of positivity around the community. What we would like to propose or ask for special permission is to basically distribute some corrugated plastic signs, similar to campaign signs, or you see the ones supporting, the local seniors, something like that. Size would be, they'd be corrugated plastic. They would be 18 inches by 12 inches, so 12 inches tall, 18 inches wide. And they would just have a positive message on them. The idea is each one, we'd probably order, we're thinking 500 signs, 100 each with a different positive message. We're going to make those available for anybody who would want one via some of the local Facebook groups, and we'll bring them out and install them. There would be no interaction with the homeowner other than them requesting us to bring a sign out. So that's basically it. I know that typically real estate signs are allowed or political signs are allowed. These are kind of a one-off of those. And the ask would be that people take them down and we could set a date that they needed to be brought down by.
And Mr. Hack, what would these signs have on them, or what kind of sayings would they have?
So it's just going to be, we're yet to decide exactly what the messages would be, but there would be, here's kind of the proposed ones. They're not going to have any any real estate logos on them or any sales advertisement. So one would say stay positive. Another one would say have courage. A third idea was be kind. A fourth idea, choose happiness. And then they would have a hashtag Casper Strong on them. White corrugated plastic with probably different color letters. Each message, maybe one would be yellow, one would be green, one would be blue.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Hack.
I just say just pretty simple. Just a way to kind of put a positive vibe and a positive message out there in the community.
Okay. Any council members have any questions for Mr. Hack? Councilman Bates.
I think I missed it. Is this, the signs going up, like, is this a donation or is this a, just anybody can put it up, or is this for profit?
It's 100% just if you request one, we're going to bring one out and put it up. No donation necessary. No, we're not trying to sell anything. We're not putting any logos on them. None of that. It's just 100% to kind of spread a positive message.
Councilman Bates.
Follow up. Are you guys making the signs, or is somebody donating these to you guys? Do you have a place that's going to do it for you, out of curiosity?
We've placed out for bid around town. We've asked a couple places. Superior Signs is getting us a bid, Bar D, and then we have also looked online to see what we could order them for as well. Basically, what I found is the price online is about $3.50 a sign, and we're going to cover that cost.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know that this is anything that the city or the council needs to approve or disapprove. I think that if homeowners, property owners want to put some kind of a sign on their property, as long as it's within, the general limits of restrictions that we have, I don't think we have anything to say about this. It sounds to me like it's probably an okay, good idea. People give the property owner gives permission, they can have at it as far as I'm concerned.
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Huber poses a good point. The city would want to be engaged in this discussion if indeed we were talking about right-of-way areas that would be the home to some of these signs. Otherwise, I would agree completely with Councilman Huber that if it's all private property, then we should be okay. So I guess I'd ask the caller, Mr. Hack, if indeed he plans to place some of these signs in the public right-of-way or not.
No, it would be strictly with the permission of the homeowner. And we would follow the guidelines that are set forth for, say, real estate signs or political signs.
Mr. City Manager, I guess I'd only add to that in separate, obviously in certain neighborhoods or HOAs, they may or may not allow campaign signs or something like that. So just to make sure they follow the rules of that, or the covenants of that neighborhood.
Mr. Mayor, I would agree wholeheartedly.
Okay. So do we need unless there's other questions or comments, do we need a thumbs up then from the council, or just they'll go ahead and move forward? Okay. So Mr. Hack, it looks like you can move forward on your project. Thank you very much.
All right. Yes, I appreciate your guys' time, and hopefully everybody stays healthy. Thank you.
Okay, the next call then we have, is it Jim Gleason? Mr. Gleason, are you online?
Okay, Mr. Gleason should be on the line now.
Mr. Gleason, are you on the line?
Good evening. I am. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Gleason.
All right. Well, thank you. First off, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for taking my call and accepting my public comment. I reached out to the Director of Parks, Mr. Cortez, a couple of weeks ago, and then also sent an email to the email address listed for the City Council. In both instances, I am recommending and urging and asking if the city would consider developing some community garden spots in Casper. I inquired with the Natrona County Cooperative Extension Office. They said, yep, we have a community garden area. We have a waiting list. They told me the location, which is behind their facility over by the fairgrounds. Went over there and looked, and frankly, it's, I think the site is lacking a lot of things, and given the coronavirus crisis and food uncertainty and the like, I think this might be an opportunity for people to participate in the community garden, for the city to facilitate that. There's a waiting list that the county has. They have fences and permanent structures in place, and it just doesn't seem to lend itself to being open and available to folks. There are great resources out there for community gardens and starting them. And I would ask that the city consider at some parks areas or open spaces within the city that they provide and till that ground and would make it available.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mr. Gleason? Vice Mayor Lutz.
Obviously, the city could look into adding community gardens, but I did want to point out that not only does the county have that community garden space, but Wyoming Food for Thought also has multiple locations with community gardens, so individuals can sign up with Food for Thought for those spots.
Right. I thought I saw something on a greenhouse that they had, but didn't see those facilities. In fact, we went down behind one of the old schools, and it seemed to be one. There I go. I'm just looking at the website right now. Yeah, these look to be small 8x10 or 8x8 little wooden enclosed areas. Yeah. So I am seeing that, but recognize that there is a waiting list, and that might be something that the city would consider.
Mr. Mayor, may I comment, please?
Councilman Powell.
Thank you. Mr. Gleason, I appreciate your interest in this, and you are right. We have a lot of work to do in this area. I thought I would let you know that Food for Thought now occupies a building on First Street, the old VFW building, and their plans are to build a very large second story greenhouse on the second story of that building, which of course is a major funding challenge for them. Of course, the difficulty for us is when you have, if it's city property, there's watering, there's monitoring, there's staff time involved in overseeing things. And as you well know, some people take good care of their plots and some people don't. So it's a very significant challenge. But Food for Thought really is, providing great leadership, and I would encourage you to get involved with them and offer your expertise.
Well, it's not that I have expertise. I've gardened my whole life, and I've lived in places where I have been able to do that. Did participate in a community garden at one point. My knowledge of Food for Thought is I'm in Rotary. I saw a presentation from them. They're talking about doing this for people to provide and sell. Free gardens, rentable plots, demonstration gardens, and the like. I see, just looking at this, sidewalks and little flower boxes and so forth. It's, I don't know, this is just kind of maybe smaller scale, and, I'm seeing occupational therapy, and they're volunteering in the garden and looking for donated food and providing food. I'm just talking about something where people can do it for their families. Converse County is encouraging people to, do victory gardens. As far as space available, and, I just envision this as something that the city could do in an area and plow up a, 20-foot strip that's several feet, 50 feet or 100 feet long, and then you have plots where people are accessible on the outside without the fences and the wood chips and all of that other stuff. It's just an area for people to grow. So, yeah, we have looked at Food for Thought. I've been to their building. We've purchased stuff from some of their local producers, and then I contacted the county and, just don't know how available and how that's going to be. But appreciate your time and consideration, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Okay, Councilman Bates has a question.
If I may, Mayor, Carter, what was the decision that was made on that plot over by Walmart, that grassy area? There was the park on one side, and I can't remember the name of the park. Then there was that guy that wanted to do something similar on that big grassy area. And I know that we talked about it and gave some ideas for it, or what they would be allowed to do on that city property, but I can't remember that. Do you remember, as far as that goes, what decision we made? If they were able to do a garden back there themselves, but they had to maintain it, water it, but city could take it over at any point. I don't remember.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Bates, the area that you're identifying was one that came to mind for me too. We're talking about the Meadowlark neighborhood over there, where there's that undeveloped stretch of green space, if you will, that's been in front of the council a time or two before. Indeed, that was one of the areas that neighbors had identified as being of interest for a community garden. The difficulty that we had over there was the access to water. Water terminates across the street on the other side that would have required some capital work to make happen. And so from that standpoint, the community garden was less appealing given the capital cost it would take to get adequate water to the area in question.
Councilman Bates.
Thank you for letting me follow up on that. Did we allow them, to those that had access to that land, if they wanted to put a garden in, run a hose from their house, and maintain that garden in that area with that land? Would we allow it? Do we not? I thought the guy asked that question. I wasn't sure what direction we gave, or am I remembering that wrong?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Bates, I have to confess ignorance on that point. If indeed council were to give the blessing for a community garden to be created, regardless of where it's at, we would have to be sure that it's consistent with the directives that have been given thus far by the health officer and the governor, to make sure that that type of congregation, or the level of congregation that sort of activity might expect, is appropriate. That's the first question I would have. Secondly, however, I think indeed if we do authorize a garden to be constructed, the neighbors would need to be consulted if in fact there was someone that would be amenable to running water to the area in question, if indeed water access were not available or could be made available by staff.
May I raise a point here? One of the things that I know has been done in the past where water has been a challenge is a tanker truck is put in place, and the advantage to that is it discourages people from hooking up a hose and watering. They water with buckets and cans. That way people aren't hogging the water. They're not dragging the hoses across other people's plots and the like. Looking at Food for Thought, I'm looking at their website. They have, a 4x8 plot for $10, and then you can purchase a 4x8 raised bed. So they do have, plots available. And I think this is kind of on a smaller scale for, what a family might actually do and utilize. So those are just a couple of things that I would encourage the council to think of if water is a challenge. Perhaps just a truck with a spigot on it to encourage bucket watering, and then 20 by 20 plots.
Mr. Gleason, I would just add one more thing to that, is that I have seen the plans. I don't know what stage they're in, but I do know that there's a plot of land out by Driven Motorsports on 2nd Street. The Wyoming Medical Center owns that land. It's roughly 5 acres, and I believe that the plan for that now was to do a community garden out there. Again, I don't know what stage it's in, but I did see the initial drawing for that. So, I mean, that's a 5-acre parcel out there, so that's pretty good sized garden that you're talking about, if that does in fact come around.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and to plant that seed, so to speak. And my contact information is available, and I'll look forward to comments and following this and seeing if something can be done. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before we go to our next caller, Mr. Rodriguez had called in, and we need you to call back to 235-8215. And so we'll move on to the next caller, which is Mr. Joe Tubes. Joe, are you on the line?
Okay, Mr. Toops should be on the line now.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Tubes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. Again, this is Joe Toops, Centennial Hills HOA President. I represent 513 households in Centennial Hills. Again, I'm trying to advocate. As you know, I spoke at one of your meetings. I haven't had a chance to come to the last two due to pneumonia. But what we're mainly concerned about up here when Kensington Heights begins, we're concerned about blowing dirt, construction debris, and open dumpsters. We've been struggling with that on Croydon Drive and in Gosfield Village 4. It's been a real struggle. Not much enforcement has taken place. Hello, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Mr. Manager. Joe Toops from Centennial Hills HOA. Again, I'm advocating for the 500 plus households we have up here. We are not against Kensington Heights development. I just would really like if we could get some attention paid to blowing construction debris, blowing dirt, garbage out of the dumpsters. I did receive, after the time I spoke down at the last meeting, I did receive a message from Craig Collins stating that they might even put together a code enforcement planning. Code enforcement planning will draft an ordinance to the council for consideration about covering dumpsters. And I realize it's very tough to cover these big dumpsters, but the contractor needs to pay attention to them. When they get full, they sit for a week or two and they put the cardboard on top and everything just blows out of them. I recall taking my contractor test decades ago. The blowing dirt, I remember getting letters as a contractor that dirt could be no higher than 6 foot, had to be watered down a couple times a day, that sort of thing. Again, I would just really appreciate, and I know my people up here would really appreciate not trashing out this neighborhood when they strip that ground and get these houses going. I know it'll take a couple years to do that development. So I just don't want these people to take a beating up here. I would like to be able to keep the lines open, if you guys don't mind me coming down if it does get out of hand. But again, we're just really concerned about this spinning out of control on us.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Toops? Okay, no questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person we have on the line is Keith Rowland. Mr. Rowland, are you there?
He's not here yet. I'm going to patch him through.
Okay.
We did call Mr. Rodriguez, but he did not pick up, so we do have his number, but he's not available right now.
Okay.
And we are patching Mr. Rowland in right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rowland is on the line.
Mr. Rowland?
Hello?
Hello, good evening. Go ahead, sir.
Rowland. I have one question for the council, and that is regarding the tax form update for the low and no income people of Casper, the forms.
Did you have a question, Mr. Rowland?
Yes, I did. I don't know if you heard me. I'm listening on my headphones set, and it sounds like the other people are still talking regarding the gardens. Do you have a question about my? You want me to ask the question now?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, go ahead. I have one question for the council, and that is, I'm inquiring about emails I sent to the council regarding a possible city outreach to low-income, no-income people in distributing tax forms throughout the city for them to use to file their 2019 taxes so they can get the $1,200. If they do not file that form, if they did not file that form for 2018, unless they're getting Social Security and the like, they do not get the $1,200. They must file those forms, and there are no forms available at the post office, and of course the library is closed.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
I can send you this link to Mr. Rowland, but they actually backtracked on that, and they stated that they provided relief for individuals who are receiving like railroad benefits 1099s or SSA 1099s, and as long as they're receiving those forms from the federal government, they're actually not required to file the tax return for 18 and 19, unless they had obviously other reasons they needed to file tax returns.
That's correct. For those people getting that, as I stated before in my letters, those are getting Social Security, SSI, and the like, do not have to file tax forms. Those who made, let's say, zero money, get nothing from the federal government, they must file a 2019 tax form. Absolutely.
Yep.
It's on the IRS website. They must file them. If they do not file a tax form for 2019, they do not get $1,200. They didn't do any backtracking. The backtracking was the misinformation that was put out of various news media things. Originally, SSI people, Social Security would have to file. They do not, as I said in my emails, they do not. Other people like them do not. But if you made no money last year and filed no tax return, you must file a 2019 tax form to get the money.
Mr. Mayor, if I could comment?
Councilman Powell.
First off, thank you, sir. I think Mr. Rowland is performing an important service here because we do have an unknown number of people who are very low income and don't file a tax return and are not aware that they're eligible for this federal money. And so I don't know what the proper process would be. One option we could consider would be a letter to all of the nonprofits with whom we have a financial arrangement, encouraging them to inform all of their clientele that they have this option of filing a brief tax return. I believe it's just a single page. I haven't seen it, to make themselves eligible, because otherwise the government doesn't even know they exist.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Powell's correct. Reaching out to the nonprofits is probably our best avenue of trying to reach out to that affected population. And so we have begun that process of reaching out to those nonprofits that we think can help us the most in terms of getting in contact with those citizens in our community. So that process is underway, and we are trying to make that connection.
If I can say something?
Go ahead, Mr. Rowland.
The problem is I talk to people who don't have income or low income, and they're staying at a shelter, or they're staying, in some other person's home. And we have other issues besides just filing the tax form. We have a problem of also reaching out to the banks in the locally, so these people can cash the checks if, in fact, they get them, because many of them don't have any banking accounts, and to cash a check, they may need some encouragement or some type of outreach program with the local banks that we deal with to facilitate these low-income people so they can get those checks turned into actual cash. The second thing is, just because the local people at food banks or missions are contacted by the city and are made aware of the issue, it's the forms themselves that are the problem. They're not available anywhere in the city. If the city could print them and possibly one copy of the instruction and actually give them to these like food banks or missions or Life Steps Campus and the like, because just informing them of this may just be a dead end. They may not print them. They actually have to do something. And most of these people, I've been told there was an issue if you file a tax return with $0. There's a problem of filing it online. A couple of the people that said that they can't file them online. It gets rejected by the computer because you need a dollar amount in there. I'm just saying, if we can actually print them and distribute them to the low-income places that people go to, it might be a great benefit for the residents of the city of Casper.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Rowland? All right. Thank you, Mr. Rowland. And I think we still have Mr. Rodriguez next.
Yep, I'm patching him in a minute.
Okay.
Hey, Mr. Rodriguez is on the line.
Good evening, Mr. Rodriguez.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, my question is, I don't know if you guys answered it or not, but my question is, since all the viruses are, coming around and now it keeps adding up, when will you guys be shutting Casper down? I mean, I see kids running around playing together in bunches. I see people still going out, act like it's nothing. And I hear people talk, they think it's a joke. It's not a joke. I have family members that are in the medical field, and they're saying this is real stuff. I'd like to know when this is going to happen, because this is no joke.
Mr. Rodriguez, I'll answer that question the best I can for you. First of all, it's not up to us just as a city council. There's a group of leadership throughout the county And we rely on the recommendations of the infectious disease doctors within this county, along with the county commissioners, ourselves, the Wyoming Medical Centers, school board. There's a lot of people that are involved at a very high level that make a decision together as to at what point we shut anything down, or if we even do shut anything down. So it's not a decision that this council is going to make or would make. That would be made collectively at that group. Councilman Huber, did you have a comment?
I do have a comment, Mr. Mayor. I think that it's important that we recognize that there are a lot of people in town that are indeed taking this very seriously, just as the council is doing. This meeting format is far from optimal. I would much rather be there in person with everyone. But there are a lot of people that are taking this very seriously. A lot of merchants, both those that were mandated to be closed, like restaurants and bars, but a lot of other merchants have closed down. There are, however, a lot of other merchants similarly situated that are remaining open and just having business as usual. People are going there. They are congregating there. They are, not there buying necessities. They're there buying trinkets or whatever it is that they happen to want at the time. And I think that that's very irresponsible on those people's parts. It's like Governor Gordon said last Friday when he emphasized to people to just stay home. And I want to echo that people should just be staying home unless it's their necessity or something like that. It is discouraging that there are merchants that are still just open and having a good old time. And all that, in my view, all that's going to do is just prolong this crisis longer. And I just had to jump in and make those comments. I think that Mr. Rodriguez is exactly correct to be concerned about this, and I just wish more people were as concerned as he is.
Well, Councilman,
thank you guys for your time, and I'd like to say one thing is it's like to help everybody's praying for everybody, because I am praying for everybody.
thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, and I'll add to what Councilman Huber just said. Just so you know, we have had several businesses within the community that were under orders to be shut down, and we've had numerous complaints that have come in about people staying open, and those have been handed off to law enforcement and are being followed up by those law enforcement officials to make sure that those businesses understand that they are to be closed and being told again that they need to be closed.
We appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so that looks like that was our last caller, so we will move on to establish dates of public hearing. Please read the consent agenda items, or titles.
Establishing April 21st, 2020 as a public hearing date for the consideration of the following two items. Item 6A1A, liquor license sanctions / update and the open container policy. And item 6A1B, text amendment to Chapter 17.68 of the Casper Municipal Code, which pertains to the gaming, gambling in the C4 Highway Business Zoning District.
The chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing dates just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, and I saw Councilman Hopkins, but Councilman Huber seconded. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz?
Aye.
Councilman Cathy?
Aye.
Councilman Powell?
Aye.
Councilman Bates?
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco?
Aye.
Councilman Huber?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins?
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay. I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of SunTrust Number 1 Edition. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Thank you, Mayor. We have two exhibits tonight. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to G. Carter Napier, dated March 24, 2020. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated March 10, 2020.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As your exhibit will soon demonstrate here, this is in the area of Allendale Drive, Jefferson Street, and East 27th. So as you can see, this is one of those pieces of property that has the unusual distinction of having 3 frontages as it relates to the prospect of their project. In this circumstance, the petitioner is actually requesting that they be annexed into the community, as well as have a plat created along the lines of the property lines that you see here in this exhibit, as well as an associated subdivision agreement and a zoning request to zone these 2 properties, a subject property, as R3, which is a 1 to 4 unit residential type designation. The Planning Commission did also approve this with 2 pertinent conditions contingent upon your approval this evening, one of which indicates that the petitioner, the applicant, the owner would participate financially on a proportionate basis to deal with street improvements that might be needed in the years ensuing this construction and ultimate annexation. Oh, pardon me. And also that with respect to those developments, that ADA ramps as well as appropriate curb and gutter would be put into place along the 27th portion of the subject area in question here. The idea is that the structures that you see here would be removed, and that as the designation would allow, the residential portions of construction would be, or I should say the zoning would be applied to potential developments here in this area.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. The public comment phone number is 307-235-8215. We will begin with the person that requested to speak, and that is Tim Kozlowski. Hope I said that right.
Okay, he should be on the line.
Mr. Coe.
Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
City Manager.
He should be on the line.
Mr. Coe, Mr. Mayor, City Manager.
He should be on the line.
Mr. Coe, Mayor.
Mr. Kozlowski, I need just to advise you that there is a little bit of a delay with the system itself, so if you can hear us, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Kozlowski, I need just to advise you that there is a little bit of a delay with the system itself, so if you can hear us, go ahead. Okay. I guess I just am present to answer any questions that the council may have at this time. Everything that the commission went over with me. Everything that the commission went over with me.
So if I understand what he's saying is that he just wants to know if there's any questions to be asked of him. Okay. Okay, now that I got all the council members back, are there any questions of Mr. Kozlowski about this particular piece of land?
Okay, now that I got all the council members back, are there any questions of Mr. Kozlowski about this particular piece of land? Okay, now that I got all the council members back, are there any questions?
Okay, it does not look like there's any questions from council to Mr. Kozlowski, so thank you, sir, for calling in this evening.
Yep, thank you for your time, and look forward to improving the area.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition to the issues involving SunTrust Number 1 addition?
There are no others at this time.
Okay, with there being no others to speak for or against the issues involving the SunTrust Number 1 addition, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving the annexation, plat, and subdivision agreement for the SunTrust Number 1 addition to the City of Casper and zoning said addition R3, 1 to 4 unit residential.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, second by Councilman Powell. Any discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Due to it being a real estate transaction, I'm going to abstain.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With the mayor abstaining and all others voting aye, motion passed.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of local assessment district 157. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Two exhibits, Your Honor. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Andrew Beamer to J. Carter Napier dated March 11, 2020. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication is published in the Casper Star Tribune dated April 1, 2020.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is another item, as your exhibit will demonstrate here, that you are familiar with. We've talked about a number of times. The basic idea here is that the neighbors got together in the area of Jade and Arrowhead and have requested that some asphalt I should say a street surface would be constructed in the area that is currently dirt and gravel, connecting CY to their respective properties. We anticipate that this will assess the neighbors for portions of this project, as well as include operational funds that would complete this project and get these neighbors to the area in question out of the dirt and gravel and onto a solid impermeable surface equipped with curb and gutter as well.
Okay, thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. The public comment phone number is 307-235-8215. Do we have anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition to the issues involving the assessment district?
We don't have any callers.
There being no one to speak for or against the issues involving local assessment district 157, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance creating the City of Casper Local Assessment District 157, ordering the construction of improvements therein, describing the same, directing the preparation of plans and specifications therefore, providing for the publication notice to contractors, fixing the boundaries of said district, ratifying action previously taken, and prescribing details in connection with said district.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Hopkins.
Huber, second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Huber. Any discussion? Councilman Bates.
Just out of curiosity, did the other two businesses that were opposed to having this done at all come around and decided that they're willing to put the money into it as well?
Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Bates, we do have 3 of the 4 properties that have voiced support and have come around, as it were.
Any other discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Garden Creek Square Edition Number 2. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a replat, subdivision agreement, and zone change for the proposed Garden Creek Square Edition Number 2 subdivision.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Huber, moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Councilman Huber, second by Councilman Pacheco. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. Public comment phone number is 307-235-8215.
We have no callers on the line.
Okay. Discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
I'll abstain.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco. Aye. Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With abstention of Mayor Friel noted, motion passed.
Move on to the Greenway Park 3 edition. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a vacation, replat, subdivision agreement, and zone change for the proposed Greenway Park 3 subdivision.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved, Hopkins.
Second, Kathy.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Kathy. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. Public comment phone number is area code 307-235-8215. Do we have anyone that has called in at this time?
There are no calls.
Okay, discussion? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is one of those classic infill things that we've been trying to do for years, and I would just like to thank the people for putting this together, and I hope it all works and they can sell every property that they have. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With the abstention of Mayor Friel noted, motion passed.
Move on to the Kensington Heights edition number 1. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance approving a replat, subdivision agreement, and zone change for the proposed Kensington Heights addition number 1.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Who moved that? Okay. Moved by Councilman Bates, second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. The public comment phone number is area code 307-5. Do we have anyone that is called in at this time?
We do not.
Okay, any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Powell.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand in this situation, but I just hope that the gentleman who is the officer with the HOA will be kept informed as we discuss some possible changes to our monitoring of these construction sites.
Okay. Any other discussion? Any amendments? Okay, please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
I'll abstain.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With the abstention of Mayor Friel noted, motion passed.
Okay, we're going to move on to resolutions, the delegation of authority for COVID-19 response. Council will now discuss a resolution for the delegation of authority for COVID-19 response. Because this is not on the consent agenda, it will be open for discussion by council. Please read the resolution by title only.
A resolution authorizing a delegation of authority for the COVID-19 response.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution just read.
Ms. Huber, I'll move that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilman Huber, second by Councilman Pacheco. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As we've discussed a little earlier, this is a very necessary step to take with respect to the tandem deployment of an emergency operation control center. With that, the delegation of the appropriate folks and staff and people of expertise to have the authority and the blessing of the governing bodies to move forward with regard to the management of, in this case, our pandemic crisis that is besetting not only our county, but certainly the rest of the state and country. With respect to this particular resolution, we are also setting aside a tranche of funding, not only for the EOC and its operations and the supplies that it's pursuing, but also with respect to the staffing of the quarantine facilities that are being established and have been established for the purpose of caring for our sick, who we wish to isolate, if you will, and quarantine from the rest of our community, thereby potentially preventing additional infection throughout our community. So with that, Mr. Mayor, we would ask for the council to join the efforts of the rest of the agencies in our county and approve this resolution setting forward this unified command structure.
If you guys could maybe mute your mics too, some of your stuff's bleeding over into here. So we'll move to discussion now on this. Any comments from council? Any amendments?
Just, Mr. Mayor, just as a point of clarification, basically, and to let everybody know, this is following all the way up through not only Casper, but then the state, and then the federal kind of chain of command for incident command through, all the way through FEMA. Isn't that correct?
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. That is correct. Very, very consistent activities taking place throughout the country that you're dealing with tonight.
That was the point I wanted to make, is that basically this is across the country, depending on, hopefully this never gets any worse, but this would be the ultimate command situation for a total national disaster, COVID-19, massive earthquake, any of these things that affected large areas of the country. So, you know, everybody is concerned about federal government taking control and us losing our rights, but in essence, there's a method of trying to control, or not control, but trying to get everybody on the same page to manage this disaster.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this?
I'll just say, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and I know I speak for everyone, and it seems repetitive, but I'm very proud of how this community has responded, and I'm proud of the people who've been in leadership positions. We owe great debt to Dr. Dowell and the other people at the health department who have been making difficult decisions, but so many others have stepped up to help. And it really, in a strange sort of way, when you're not interacting with people, there is a real sense of community, and I'm proud of this community.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pacheco.
I'd like to move to pass the Natrona County, Wyoming Joint Delegation of Authority for COVID-19 Response Resolution.
Councilman Pacheco is moved to pass the Natrona County, Wyoming Joint Delegation of Authority for COVID-19 Response Resolution. Do I have a second?
Aye.
Second by Councilman Hopkins. Mr. City Manager, do you have any comments on this item?
Mr. Mayor, this was a resolution that was brought forward by the county, and one that they have also signed off on, and in my estimation provides that extra layer of detail and transparency with regard to the very efforts that are taking place in conjunction with the first resolution that you just passed.
Okay. Any discussion? And any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 9B1 of the agreement with Central Wyoming Regional Water System Joint Powers Board for the 2020 roof replacements. Item 9B2, authorizing an energy-efficient commercial building deduction to Hein Bond Architects and Casper Electric as part of the Baylor Buildings MRF expansion project. Item 9B3, an agreement with Wharton Asphalt for the residential crack sealing project. Item 9B4, an agreement with Sheet Metal Specialties for the Aquatics and Rec Center HVAC replacements project. Item 9B5, an agreement with SWI for the Event Center fencing project. Item 9B6, an agreement with Wayne Coleman Construction for the CPU asphalt repair project. Item 9B7, an agreement with Knife River for the miscellaneous concrete and storm sewer repairs project. Item 9B8, authorizing a lease with the State of Wyoming Department of Administration and Information General Services Division for premises commonly known as the Goodstein parking lot. Item 9B9, an outside city services annexation policy. Item 9B10, an agreement with Golder Associates for the solid waste monitoring upgrades and landfill cell planning project. And item 9B11, an agreement with Golder Associates for the closed bale fill monitoring upgrades project.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
A move by Councilman Pacheco, second by Councilman Johnson. City Manager, would you like to comment on any of these items?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent minute action title.
Approving a transfer of ownership for restaurant liquor license number 31, doing business as Himalayan Indian Cuisine.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda item just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay, at this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. So let's start with Councilman Huber.
I just want to really recognize the work that our first responders, ambulance riders, emergency room people, and the fire department, and the police department, and sheriff's office, that all of them are doing, dealing with people that are sick and suffering from sickness right now. They are really truly serving in the highest traditions of those professions, and I really admire them, and I think we should recognize their hard work and self-sacrifice.
Thank you. Councilman Powell.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to let you all know that the Disability Council continues to meet. They had a online meeting this morning and completed some bylaws changes that are relatively minor, but they are experiencing some turnover in the council. But it is an active group, and there's still a lot of energy, and so I think we did the right thing by forming that group. And I think we'll see some good things coming to the community as a result. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank staff. I know this is a rather difficult situation for them to put together all the stuff that needs to happen to make a meeting happen online. And it's worked very well, in my opinion. The other thing I want to tell you is today they started out third story on a new office building. The iron workers are up there working in the wind, and it looks really cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson.
I just want to thank everybody for their hard work. I shut my camera off because my internet is pretty spotty. So, other than that, I have nothing else.
That was it. Councilman Kathy?
Something I would like to bring up, and I hope you all saw the email I sent out to all council members and city manager, but this is covering where we might go if there were a shelter-in-place order issue. And the questions that I have been getting from business owners is some of these business owners during this time of just social distancing have gone ahead and started some renovations, upgrades, and are planning some. But the concern of these people in both situations is if we were to go to a shelter-in-place order, what is that going to, or how is that going to affect them, and what are we going to allow them to do? Will they be able to continue with their construction projects as long as themselves and the construction workers keep the social distancing, or are we going to require, or is that going to be a part of the shelter-in-place requirement that they have to stop all construction activity? And I guess I would primarily be dealing with city manager and Mayor Friel for this, because they have been attending all of the meetings and things and may have a better feeling for where this is going.
Councilman Kathy, and I'll let the manager jump in here too, but I can tell you from the discussions that we've had at this point, it's really going to depend on what the orders say and when they come down as to what they will and will not allow to happen, if they do in fact come down. But a lot of it's going to rely back upon what the orders strictly prohibit or allow. Mr. City Manager, you have something to add to that, or okay, or even Mr. Attorney? Okay.
Are you getting any feeling for where they might go?
Well, I'll tell you right now, from the discussions we saw last week, I think where we're at today is where I'm thinking we're going to stay unless things take a drastic change on us. We're trying to keep things in check and do everything we can to make sure that things don't get out of hand and we can continue moving forward where we're at today. You're not the first person to ask that. I've had several businesses that are completely overhauling their buildings while they have the downtime, and they have the exact same concern. And I have to give them the exact same answer that today, move forward and get your project done, but I can't promise what tomorrow might bring.
Very good. That was the question I was interested in, and yes, that was the question I have got from some that are also in the middle. And not having our meetings and some of our other things, wanted to open up that line of communication there. So I do appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Lutz.
Just echo everybody's thanks to all essential workers, including things like grocery store workers and all medical staff and things of that nature.
Thank you. Councilman Bates.
I just want to echo what Councilman Huber mentioned earlier about that there is a lot of Casper citizens, if not Natrona County citizens, that are taking this very serious, wearing masks, gloving up, being careful how many of family members go into stores. There is a lot of people that are taking this very serious, and I want to give kudos to our citizens in Casper and tell them thank you so much for trying to keep exposure to a minimal as we possibly can. And those that are not, please take it all into consideration and follow the ordinance that has been presented. But more importantly, don't live in fear. Continue living your life the best you can with the circumstances that we're in. But please don't live in fear of this. We're going to get through it and move forward, and we're going to learn from it and be better from it. So that's it.
Okay, Councilman Pacheco?
Nothing tonight. I think everybody's spoken. So thank you.
Okay, a few things that I'll add tonight. We have had, manager and I had discussions with the local grocers, with just about all of them. In fact, we had regional people from Walmart that got involved, and I think it was a very good dialogue. And should we ever end up in a situation where we do have a shelter-in-place order put in, I think there's a pretty good plan in place on how things are going to be handled. Some of those grocery stores have actually gone and reduced the amount of people they allow into their stores by square footage, and more taking responsibility of, you know, social distancing, placing X's on floors, things like that. So I applaud all of those that have taken those steps ahead of time and helping the situation out. I guess to speak a little bit more on part of the resolution tonight, we have basically started off with $25,000 on the city, and the county is looking at doing the same thing today. Those funds are going to be used to pay for nursing, and let me explain the situation that we're in. Half of our cases right now of positives in the county are coming out of WBI. We have people that are on holds up there that are going to have to be released back into the community. Some of these people have nowhere to go. And so prior to releasing them, because of the fact they have been exposed to this, we have to put a facility in place in order to quarantine these people to make sure that we're not putting them out into the community and potentially spreading this virus more than what it is. So with that said, we have a facility set up. We are working on staffing now. We've put out basically a call for volunteers, and those funds are going to be used to pay for these volunteers, because we don't have funding coming from any other source right now to pay for these nurses to basically care for these individuals until we can clear them and show that they are no longer or not affected or infected with the virus itself. So it's been kind of a point of contention the last couple of days of where the funds are going to come from, and the decision was made that we're stepping up to provide those funds to take this situation and quarantine these people and make sure that we're not just kicking them out into the community and potentially spreading this virus. So that's why that was passed today. That's where the funds are going, and I think we're on the right track now. Those releases will start happening here real soon, and hopefully we'll have we have a good plan in place to not let this spread any further than what it has right now within that one facility. And that's all I have for right now. So the next meetings of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, April 14th, 2020, as a video conference call, and a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, April 21st, 2020, with location to be determined. A notice of an executive session to take place at this date and during this meeting was given. We have a matter to discuss regarding personnel and potential litigation. Therefore, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session, and at the conclusion of the executive session to reconvene this regular meeting solely for the purposes of adjournment of this regular meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco. Do I have a second?
Second, Hopkins.
Second by Councilman Hopkins. There being a majority of members present and a motion to adjourn into an executive session having been moved and seconded, and that motion requiring a 2/3 majority of the council present. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Paul.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson. Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
A greater than 2/3 majority of the council present voted in favor of the motion. We are hereby adjourned into executive session. Council, please stay on your lines there. We will resume once staff has reset the equipment.